just want to listen to the whole song. All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Underground QA podcast, a podcast about quality assurance in the video game industry. My name is Ariel. My pronouns are she, her, and today we have four fellow QA professionals joining us, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hey there, my name is Chelsea Curran Adams, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hey, I'm Sarah Gallardo. My pronouns are she, her.
Hello, my name is Myron Parks, and my pronouns are he, him.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Rando, and my pronouns are he, him.
Awesome. So today our discussion is about women. There is a harsh reality to confront about the way the gaming industry as a whole dehumanizes the women that work in it, and the recent lawsuits in the news and other allegations that have come to light are just a very visible tip of a very large iceberg. Women face harassment, mistreatment, pay inequity, and more. So today we're going to talk about these issues as they relate to the game industry and share some of our own experiences. So to kick us off, we kind of want to just take a second to acknowledge the current state of the industry. Does anyone want to kind of jump in and say something about that? If not, I can. I'll do it. No, it's fine. So, as I'm sure many folks who listen and watch are aware, there have been some recent allegations that have come out about Activision Blizzard. This is by far not the only company that has had these kinds of accusations come out, and there are several lawsuits in process happening right now about a few different companies, and some of the claims that are being made are that the women were harassed, that they were working in toxic environments. Does anyone want to talk a little bit about the specific allegations that stood out to them?
Yeah. For me, it was the conduct of some of these men with the kind of shaming of the women that they worked with. Like the one that really just made my head explode was the sharing of pictures during holiday parties. That's just awful. Like just like sharing these like private pictures.
Yeah,
to
someone
each other.
had access to some, private. I think they were even nude photos, but they were private pictures, and they were like sharing them with their colleagues at a holiday party.
Yeah, with other coworkers. That was completely bonkers, and the results of doing that, of just what it did to that person, caused her to end her life.
Yeah,
like that was insanity. That treatment to do that to another human.
I think, unfortunately, Ariel mentioned earlier, it is not just a game industry problem, not a specific game company problem. It's like it's a global problem. I think, there are lots of different ways that people experience shame. It's definitely not a gendered thing, but I do think that positions of power for women can be difficult ones, especially when they're objectified so frequently in the media. We have allowed things like being topless for women to be very taboo, whereas being topless for men is completely legal and not taboo.
That's an important point, like literally legal.
Yeah. And so it's systemic. We've talked about systemic inequity and systemic problems when we did the Black Lives Matter podcast last year. I think, what we're seeing is a product of our system in this situation specifically. It is socially acceptable behavior, though abhorrent, to objectify women on the regular.
Right.
Yeah.
And like on the legal side of it too, like so I moved to Canada in 2018, and there was something very significant that I noticed. Um, uh, um, in the United States, it's very clear to me that a lot of this stems from the fact that like constitutionally, women aren't protected as equal citizens. Like like sure the states do it, sure some localities do it, sure if you're rich enough, sure if you have the right father, right? Um um but like the laws, like I was telling some friends the other day, I was like, understand that in the United States, it's like the United States is like 3 decisions away from the Handmaid's Tale.
And I mean, honestly, like, there are places, it sounds bad, but like, there are places in the world that are way, way worse.
Yeah. 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 And from a social perspective, and it's really important to focus on the social aspect of it. The laws are constructed by what we think is right. And I mean we as in like typically guys are like, yo, it's totally acceptable to, for example, take a picture like in full color with really good lighting of Bill Cosby, like in the Bill Cosby room at the hotel.
Like, and that's
like show up to work the next day like, yo, like last weekend was the shit, right?
Yeah. Sarah, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in if you had anything to add.
No, I think Chelsea pretty much nailed it, and Myron as well. There was a news clip of several years back that, to link this to the Black Lives Matter podcast, said, who signed the Declaration of Independence? White people. And it's like, well, who's making the laws right now? Usually white men. So we can't have equality until we have equality socially.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that is... Oh, go ahead.
Just a comment on that. I'm looking at some statistics. So in 1945, non-white lawmakers made up only 1% of the House and Senate. And now 23% make up the House and Senate. Let's take a look at that in terms of women. Only on, I think it's the average is 25%. So we're very close. We're very, very close for non-white and women in government in the U.S. Not to be super U.S. centric, but those are the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think given the fact that all 5 of us are from the U.S., this is definitely going to be some very U.S.-centric perspectives, and we should almost certainly own that. There was another thing I wanted to kind of briefly touch on about this conversation, which is to say that a lot of these issues can also affect non-binary people as well. We are specifically talking about women today, but like I said, a lot of them also affect non-binary people, and I don't want to, I want to at least acknowledge that they are also facing similar issues, and it's not something that only affects women. But today we are specifically talking about how it affects women. So that kind of that's sort of the state of the industry as it is. There's lots of issues and problems. We're going to dive into them a little bit here. But first, in kind of the spirit of the same way we did our Black Lives Matter podcast, we want to kind of put some of the emotional labor here on Myron and Chris. So for both of you, I have a question, which is, where were you when you realized that women are people?
That's a hell of a question. Like, that's a wild question. My first thought is like, women have always been people, right? It's just like, come on, how can that's such an obvious thing to feel like that? Of course they're people. Like, my mom taught me well. I had very positive women role models growing up. Like, my mom's like an English professor. She's a champion slam poet, masters in critical and creative thinking. Like, anything that was like sexism and misogyny did not fly. That did not fly at all. I heard about it. And so I always felt like I knew better, but I did. It can't be true that I'm just some like saint. It's like I've always been good. I never did anything wrong. It's not true. So I did some thinking, and I remembered back to a time, so a long time ago, as I'm sure many of those people who have currently work in the game industry. I used to work for a well-known video game retailer, and while I was at work, it was like the middle of the day, like a weekday or something. I was called out by my coworker for blatantly flirting with a customer. And what happened is a woman came into the store. I was like, okay, it's a customer. And she was an attractive woman. And I went to her, and I guess I was being more charming than I usually would be, in a kind of like, that's no good. Chris is obviously flirting with this person. And talked with the person, did the transaction. To me, it just felt like I was just kind of being a little extra because she was pretty. I was just kind of doing my thing. Didn't think much of it. When she left, I go back to the counter, and my coworker, who is a woman, called me out immediately on that and told me not only like how I must have made that person feel, but also like how I made her feel to watch me do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that moment of realizing, like, to me, it was just like, oh, I'm just being flirty. That's no big deal. But like, how does it feel to try and just do an everyday interaction where you go into a retail store and you just want to look around, pick something, maybe talk to a sales rep if you have a question, and then just go about your day without being looked at as a romantic pursuit?
Yeah.
So that was that moment where it was just, I am not only affecting this person that I was obviously flirting with, but I'm also affecting the person who I work with and the way that they now view me as mildly creepy. That was awful. And it's just realizing like, no, this is a person. These are people.
And something that, very easily could have been going through your coworker's head is how she feels when people hit on her while she's working, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep. She was the only woman who worked at that store. Surprise. Like literally the only one. I think we ended up hiring 2 more over the course that I was there. And like how she would feel being, like, you're totally right. Additionally, because it was a store full of guys and she was the only girl, we viewed her as like a little sister. So we were all like ultra protective of her. Like, no, we got this. We'll make sure that you'll be fine. Instead of like, no, she's a completely capable human of just functioning in the world and doing her own thing.
I've lived that life in probably the same mega retailer.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only female at my store.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like to try to try to lean in with empathy. It's almost like, so I'm a very large guy, and like when I go to my doctor and my finger is bent, like in the bone showing, and I'm like, hey, can you help me fix this? Well, Myron, we should talk about your weight. Like we really should talk about. It shows that they force you to stand on the scale for no reason, and I have your weight now, so now I can talk to you about this again. Wait, no, but I'm here for this service, and like, why are you literally judging my body?
Just immediately, yeah.
Immediately, like, and because of your position of power, you can literally have me do anything, or you can refuse the care that I've come to seek. So where was I when I realized that women were people? So when I grew up, like, I remember watching TV shows with like computer people, and they were all white guys. And so when I worked at a very large credit bureau, and the team was almost all women. So like for the first time in my life, I actually became, let me repeat this. For the first time in my life, I actually, because the team was like all women and 2 guys, I realized, hey, I can become friends with women.
Whoa.
Because there were no other guys there. The guy was a jock, and I'm not a jock. And so one of my friends had a baby. And I remember she was like, hey, Myron, remember you're going to be taking over this stuff while I'm out for literally 4 weeks. And And I was like, yeah, I got it. Like, you do this thing, and I was completely wrong. She was like, all right, well, why don't I come over and show you how to do it? Because I'm a gist person. Remember, I'm a quality artist, if you've seen some of the other episodes. And so she comes by. She's like, all right, I'll be right over there. And I lean out of my cubicle, and she's walking. She's about 8.5 months, and she's doing the waddle. And she is amazing. She has amazing color, and she loves, but she's waddling, and I'm like, my friend is having a baby. And then it my mind cut to all the conversations in male polite company talking about, why should we have disability? Why should women be able to keep their jobs? Why should women get 12 weeks with a new baby? Why should? I remember times when family members of mine would say things like, yeah, I don't hire women at all. Well, why? Well, because they ask for benefits in the interview. They haven't proven themselves yet. Why? I've been, in the room when people have been like, yeah, I fired that woman because she didn't tell us that she was pregnant. Yeah.
What?
And so, yeah. So I realized that women were people, and I asked her, I was like, hold on a second, you said 4 weeks? Yeah. Well, where does the baby go? Oh, well, the baby goes to daycare. I was like, I've never seen the commercial of the daycare place that shows that room. That seems like that movie Soldier with Kurt Russell. If you ever seen the movie Soldier with Kurt Russell, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a room with babies in it. And they began doing the operant training and the conditioning of the babies, when they're in the plastic container.
Hopefully she sent them to a different daycare.
Well, but they would have to send them to, well, yes, not to the Soldier Academy. But I was like, hold on a second. So you have to come here and deal with that boss and that boss and that boss and people yelling, and your football-sized baby? How are you gonna, what? And it was well, we have really good benefits here. Most women at that time didn't have any of that. The maximum was 6 months, and they couldn't work from home. Imagine flipping burgers after taking 2 weeks. Not like the woman that ran Yahoo. That was 2 weeks. Yes, I'm sure that was hell for her family, but it was a CEO. Imagine working at McDonald's and having to do the same thing, because that's normal back then. Probably still now. Let's be honest.
It's interesting. I've been listening to Radical
Where does the
Candor.
baby go?
I've been listening to the book Radical Candor on
Good book.
Audible. It's super awesome. It's by Kim Scott.
Mhm.
And there's this part where she's talking about whether or not she wanted to take this job as a CEO. And her doctor straight up told her that, well, given the amount of stress that you're going to be under as a CEO, I don't want to say don't do it, but you might have to consider where your priorities are, right? Because maybe your priorities are focusing on your child for the next few months or year or whatever, as opposed to trying to do that and also run a company. Which I thought was, I don't know, it was just something I had never really considered before, that women might make decisions about their career based on what's best for the health of their family, right? And I don't think anyone would have blamed her if she had gone ahead and done it, right? If she had gone ahead and taken that position. She seems like a very capable woman. I'm sure she could have made it work, but she decided to take a different, less traveled route, which I think is admirable.
I think, Ariel, that's an amazing point, because I've had moments in my life where I'm like, okay, so am I going to put my career on hold so I can have a family? Am I going to put my career on hold so I can pursue this life pursuit? And not that men don't experience this, because I think we all experience it in some way, shape, or form, right? If we have a loss in the family, we take a moment. If we have a moment where we purchase a home, or the big life milestones, we tend to say like, okay, I need to take off the gas in some place and reallocate.
Mhm.
But I think something I think about as a woman is like, is this the end of my career? Is this the moment when I lose my ability to keep on the trajectory that I'm on right now?
Yeah.
And that's where like we as men don't have to think about that.
Right.
It's like
Right.
if my wife and I are deciding to have a child, I'm just thinking, okay, I'll have to take parental leave for a month or so. I'll be around, be here, and that's that. And my career will be just fine. But like for her, she has to think about that. What does that mean? Like, how does that mean with like how long she's going to be out? Will her job still be there? Will they still keep her around? And just that decision of what it's going to do for her is wild. I never have to consider that. It's more like, oh yeah, we'll change the family. I will be here for the kid because I'm a progressive male in 2021, but it's not even close to the same thought process.
Yeah. Like there's an example. Like I was studying school psychology, and when you study school psychology, at a certain point, you have to go and do service learning. Ideally, you try to go to do service learning at the school you want to be placed at.
Mm-hmm.
And so I met the school nurse. The school nurse had been at that school or in the system like 20 or 30 years. Like that school nurse was going to be there, had a lot of power, and they were the school nurse, like the sole place to get health care at the entire school. Within 20 minutes of meeting this person, they asked me, how old are you? And I told them, and they said, well, how many kids do you have? And I said, I don't have any kids. And they said, well, it's God's will for you to have children. And I was able to go, it's not going to happen. and if I had gone to that school as an intern, I would have been okay. Imagine if any of my women classmates in the cohort who had gone to that school and intended to have a meaningful career at all in that school district, which was the entire CPS system of 400,000 teachers, they would be done.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that, oh, go on, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And like, I didn't even have to think about it. I was able to go, I'm just not having kids. I'm just not having kids. No, yeah, I'm not having kids though.
I think that there's a weird thing though that we've done as a society, which is place the raising, at least in America. I know that this is different in different places, but we've placed the labor of children on women, and we've also placed it on biological birth in some ways. And let me explain what I mean. Like, having had several friends who've gone through the adoption process or fertility issues, like, assume that you don't have a normal pregnancy situation. We then start to deduct points from the credibility of that parental experience in a way. We start to reduce the amount of time or authenticity to that relationship. If you adopt your child, you get less leave because you didn't, biologically have that. Now, that's not the case in some places, but remind yourself that having a child is not the biological act of having a child in all circumstances, but the act of bonding and raising a healthy baby. No matter the gender situation, the birthing situation, the feeding situation, we've placed a lot of pressure on women. We've specifically placed a lot of pressure on the traditional method of having a family. And reality is we need to start opening ourselves up to like raising a good human and allowing people to have those first couple of months of that, and not crucifying people for wanting that, for wanting to spend time with the new member of their life.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I am glad that parental leave is becoming a much more common benefit, and it's also we're seeing it become required in more places in the world. I think the United States is kind of falling behind in that regard, but there are definitely lots of countries that across the board have really strong parental leave laws. But yeah, I mean, this particular issue is something that I feel a little blind to, because I don't personally have a lot of women friends who have been pregnant while they're working, except for my sister. And thankfully she was able to work from home, but she still took off quite a bit of time for parental leave because she needed to not just be around her child, but focus like entirely on making sure this baby was healthy and taken care of.
Right. Can I mention one thing before we move on from the sort of like, this is what it sounds to me like, this is the kind of conversation that you can have when you realize that women are people.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about these things, and like, frankly, before I moved in onto teams that were mostly women, and the woman was the manager, and the woman's manager was a manager, was a woman. We never talked about like stuff like this, but like, I would say, I lucked out in that I've always had low testosterone, and I think that matters. It's not the only thing, but it gives me a little bit of breathing room from the target reticle thing, Terminator thing, that is driven in some ways by that. But that's as far as I'll go, and even insinuating that it is a nature thing. So we are not talking about nature versus nurture here. We're talking primarily when a person is in their 30s or their 40s and they have 2 degrees and they're running departments, that's a nurture situation. Like, we don't have the technology yet to like that grow a 30-year-old executive at a game company. Right?
Nor do I want to. I don't want to have a vat grown executive, personally speaking.
Do I get to be the vat grown executive and skip my teens?
Right? Yeah. Like,
And then does it add on 30 good years to the end?
Oh yeah, are you 30 for 30 years as opposed to being 30 for 1 year or something?
I would love that. My 30s have been amazing. Please, let's continue this. I will take being 30 for 30 years.
Cool. So let's move on. So the next thing that I really want to talk a little bit about is hiring women in games. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but there was a woman by the name of Ada Lovelace, and she was the world's first computer programmer. So my question for this section is, if it is the case that the world's first computer programmer was a woman, why is it the case that only 22 to 30% of the industry is made up of women?
So correct me if I'm wrong, to go along with that historical context. I might be wrong with this little factoid, but I feel that like coding and programming at that time was considered woman's work. Is that correct?
Yeah, administrative.
Yeah, it was more administrative and like, okay, just go write some code while we do the thinking.
Yeah.
But
for
I mean,
hashtag reasons.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because like one of the not even one, but like there were several other pioneers in computers and also in games early on. But the industry has skewed pretty hard towards male employees. So one statistic I was looking at was from IGDA back in 2016. They did a survey that said 22% of professionals in the game industry were women. And there was another statistic I was looking at that said in 2021 it was 30%, which at least indicates that it's slowly changing for the better. But why is that? Why is it? How is it the case that we're continuing to see really low numbers of women in the industry? And there's one article I'd like to talk about in particular. There's an article by Gama Sutra or Gama Sutra, Gama Sutra.
Gamma.
And I'll post this in the chat here. Yeah, so basically a new studio was founded and they released a photo of their studio, and every single person in the photo was male. Also predominantly white, like very heavily skewing towards white. But every single person in that studio photo was male. And so they talked a little bit to the CEO and the folks who run the company about, like, you know, how exactly did this happen, and their explanation. We can get into their explanation a little bit, but I'm curious to know, like, what do y'all think happened? How did the studio come to be almost entirely male?
Easy. Guys tend to think that women aren't skilled enough, and we use excuses like, oh well, they don't have enough experience because we kept them out of roles that are what we're looking for. And oh, by the way, I know these 3 people who also got in early enough to get good, and so let's just do that. And then, by the way, we want the most qualified people and to create really good shit, and like the DEI stuff is, you know, optional. They're not willing to burn calories for equity.
Yeah. Well, let's assume, like, the best intentions though, right? Like, let's say that these guys genuinely wanted to have women, and they genuinely wanted to have a diverse studio, and they're not being dishonest when they said that that's important to them, right? But they still wound up with an entirely male studio.
Oops, slip.
So
You know?
I think when I think about this, I think a phrase that has been used and that I've used, that makes me sort of ashamed that I use it, but the industry is really small, is a phrase that people use a lot. And I think a more genuine phrase you hear when you're going up through even college and high school is like, it's who you know, not what you know. And so factually, you tend to navigate towards people who are the same as you, whether that's the same life some circumstances, socioeconomic. You are a product of the environment that you place yourself in, and so it's why folks who travel have more diverse perspectives on life and generally tend to have more diverse networks. It's why people who work for larger companies also tend to have more exposure to different spaces in the world and different methodologies of doing business. So why is that? Well, you just have a net large enough that you cast. But for indies and for small groups, if you look at your circle is your set of influences. And so very likely these folks did not have many diverse external influences. And their network is also probably not very diverse. And so there's nepotism, which refers to like a familial passing down, but we can also look at networks as nepotistic. We bring in the people that we know. And that's a very base, I think, human reaction, right? It was a survival technique. Don't trust the survival of your tribe on an unknown. Give it to someone that you know who's vested in making sure that you survive and succeed. And not that I think that that's the right perspective, because it is definitely not. But from a very like normal standpoint, if we approach this with compassion, these folks were looking at the community that they trust, which isn't always the community that you should trust.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and so also, so like you said, nepotism, I think that's a really big aspect of it. But I think, to the point I made earlier, it's NIMBYism. Yo, Black Lives Matter, blackout, blah, blah, blah. Yo, let's start a studio. Well, this shit's real important. So we're going to we're going to make sure that we have twice the salary for, the really important roles, wink. And then, later, roadmap, phase 2, we'll deal with that shit that we sent some cash over there
Mm.
to do. But like here, though, this is really important, and we can't really, you know what I'm saying? This is business that we're talking about here. Over there is fine, but not right here.
Yeah, I think it's kind of crazy that we have this idea of like, yeah, we'll get to it later. And like, okay, this is an insane thing, but I've had this conversation more than once in my career in more than one space. Do we hire the diverse candidate that has less experience but just as much potential? And like, yes.
Yeah, it's like where's the reason not to?
But then you get pushback because then you're like, well, are we following some form of quota? And then you start to question all of these things of like from a realistic hiring perspective.
Yeah.
What do you have the energy to be able to do on your team?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a very scary thing to say we're willing to take the person that we have to but they haven't had the opportunity, but they haven't had the all of those things. It is a scary thing nonetheless from a business perspective to say we're going to take a chance and we have to put ourselves out there to do it. I have to attend this conference that I'm not used to doing. I have to pull interns from a different place. I have to take a different level of education than I'm used to doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. I mean, so I would also say that there is some flawed thinking in the idea of saying, well, we should always hire the most experienced person, right? All things being equal, we should hire the person with the most experience. But if you always do that, if you always hire the most experienced person, then your perspective is going to skew towards the status quo, right?
Yep.
You're just going to skew really hard towards doing the same exact thing
you're not
that
bringing
every
in new
studio has ever done before you. You're not going to do
Mhm.
anything new.
Yes.
So regardless of whether or not a less experienced candidate is better or is worse than a more experienced candidate, by virtue of the fact that you are only hiring the most experienced people, you are harming your studio because you are not going to have a diverse set of perspectives. And I don't even mean diverse in terms of diverse from both men and women, from both white and black people. I'm talking about you don't have a diverse perspective of game developers.
Yeah.
Because their experience is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
The games they play are completely different.
If you only hire people who've worked in the engine that you've worked in, for instance, this is one that I hear a lot of. Like, we only hire people who've worked in X engine. That's not a current situation that I live in, because I actually think that any engine experience is valid engine experience. If you can apply the concept,
you want engineers. I'm sorry, I had to say
right. But you want engineers with good hygiene, right? Or you want quality assurance people who think that quality is more than testing, or those are the things that we should be talking about. And so it's why I like questions that are, tell me about a time when you, or tell me about this experience that you had, because it could be a group project from college, which was a year ago for you, or it could be 20 years of experience. And if you can't pull a grain of authentic truth, it doesn't matter, right? But what does matter is that you can synthesize, you can use this human brain. Humans doing human things, human brains doing human brain work. Like I've said before, you have to be able to use your noggin, not like repeat a calculator experience.
Yeah.
Right. And like two, so like, okay, so that's one side. But let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about the fact that there are amazing women who can do everything that's thought labor, that doesn't require a fucking pull up of like 100 pounds connected to the waist, right? Or any other arbitrary shit that people come up with. So let's say because I honestly think that one of the biggest challenges through every stage of the career to get to like the most dopest people is, all right, well, you're almost too good to have this job. I've actually been asked this for other reasons, but what's the catch?
Yeah.
And what's the catch? And so how do you counter that? How do you counter that when you're going for your first job or your second job or your 13th job and you've run entire departments, but you were not allowed to have the label of the person that ran the department? Like, you've been running everything, but you cannot, for some reason, the paperwork can't clear for you to get the title. That happens too.
Oh, sure it does.
We haven't heard from you, Sarah.
Yeah, I was
What are you
just gonna
thinking?
say, I feel
Yeah.
like we've been hearing a lot from some folks and not at all from you, Sarah. So let's just kind of slide back towards, or Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add to what Myron was saying?
Yeah, so I think another reason that we've kind of circled around but not explicitly touched on is the idea of culture fit. And if you have
Ooh.
your leaders set the culture, if your leaders are going to be all men, they're going to set a culture where men, mostly, generally speaking, fit. And there's something Myron said a long time ago that stuck with me is he looks for people who provide culture ads, who are going to build the culture, add to the culture,
Yeah.
and improve it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So important too, because like there are small things to culture that we need to think about as leaders in our space or members of a culture. Are we accepting drinking as being the predominant means that we get together? Are we thinking about people who may do alternative activities, right? So for one thing that I'm doing very soon is I'm doing a painting session with all folks so that we can do something that is more in touch with like how we deal with our emotions and how we see the world. Are we making sure that we're providing diverse experiences for our culture so that people can share what their contributions to the culture are? So I would caution you to say like it's not a gendered thing, but being a female and going to a bar, I will guarantee you that I have to think about a lot more things than my male counterparts do.
Mm-hmm.
When I go to the bathroom, I need to take my bag with me. I need to make sure that my drink is okay. So do I finish this drink before? Should I order another one? Am I putting myself at risk? All of those things are things that I ambiently as a woman think about. And so I'm very sensitive about where my team drinks if we go out.
I mean, I would go as far as saying that bars are maybe not the most equitable environment to go to with a diverse team. You know,
I agree. You have people who are in recovery as well who may not be able to be around that kind of environment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the idea of let's take the whole team and go out for drinks is, I don't know. It's just I always find it a little reckless, like to approach team building that way because there's just so many variables that you're involving there, and drinking is really not a one size fits all team building exercise, no matter what you think.
Like to this point, like I know, like going to a conference. Yo, let's go to a conference. Like I remember going to conferences, even conferences for school psychology, where like 99% of the practitioners are women, but 99% of the leadership positions, as well as the presidency of the School Psychology Association, was a man somehow. And like after the conference closed at like 11 o'clock, 3 after parties. And the one that was at 2 a.m. was where I talked and met people and like got opportunities. And then afterward, I was, oh yeah, man, afterward was a drag. Like my hotel room was so far. It was like 2 miles in pitch black. And then guys just laugh. Ha 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 ha. I bet you'll get an Uber next time. And we don't think about all that. 3 after parties after the conference closes at 11 p.m. Why did the conference have to close at 11 p.m.?
Yeah. I think
casual walk afterwards.
I think about
like,
that a lot at GDC. I'm going to be really honest. To call it a very specific event where I have to really weigh my safety because I generally cannot stay right beside the conference, either whatever. That is a scary situation late at night.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes getting an Uber can be a little bit sketchy there. I even worry about Uber drivers, honestly. Like I don't love taking an Uber alone, just because I also have done some travel where that was a big no-no in some spaces in the world. Like riding alone or even in small groups and private cabs is scary.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question before we move on? Just a show of hands for the very badass panelists that we have here who are women. Is it normal, or do you feel comfortable having conversations like these at work? Like in your first week at a company, can you just talk about this stuff?
I mean, I'm pretty outspoken in general, so I feel like I wouldn't be as as scared of it as other folks, but I would be a little bit more careful with my language than I would be with people that I didn't know. So I wouldn't talk about it in the same way, even though I probably would still talk about it.
Women are people. Like I can go into a company and on day 2 talk about my vasectomy. I can make jokes.
Well, let's not talk about your vasectomy.
I'm not gonna. Yes, thank you. But I can make jokes about my urologist joking whether I had a mistress, like in a medical setting. All right, so you haven't had kids with your wife, but like, have you had any other kids?
Yeah.
Normal.
Yeah,
Normal.
that's just normal guy locker room talk, right? That's totally fine.
There are a couple more things that I want to get to before we move on here. So going back to this example we were talking about from Gama Sutra, the studio, by the way, is called Raccoon Logic, and one of the things that they said, that specifically Hutchinson and Schneider, the co-founders, said was that they were cobbling the team together from the people that were around them, right? They weren't like putting up general hiring postings or job positions anywhere. They were just like, oh, I know you, come join me at this new studio. I know you, come join me at this new studio. So it's definitely that, like, well, if you know someone, you're more likely to get in through the door, and you're more likely to know someone if you've already been in the industry. And if you've already been in the industry, you're more likely to be white and male.
Yeah.
So it's not hard to see how studios wind up with a pretty specific skew, even with this studio. And again, like, we can assume the best of intentions of these two, right? Like, they didn't mean to create an all white, all male studio.
Yeah.
It's just, it happened that the way in which they were going about creating their studio was inherently flawed.
Yes.
So
their circles that they were pulling from, and like you said, it was probably well-meaning. Their circles weren't diverse enough to pull anyone that wasn't a white dude.
Yeah,
I'm just not going to give this credit. I'm sorry.
I'm not.
I'm going to be a little bit more militant about this. Poor white men who couldn't find other people to be around them, who couldn't look at each other and say there might be a problem here. Like, I'm sorry, I don't accept that. And the fact that the language, Ariel, I don't know if you said cobbling together or if they said cobbling together.
That was what they said.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Oh, no.
We are starting a company. We're starting a group that we want to be successful. And if you use the verb cobbling, then what I think of is like, you're literally finding the dregs of what's available. Gee, that speaks well to the people that you brought in. You were cobbled together. So not only are you incapable of finding diverse perspectives around you, but you're also saying, like, we found the remnants of what was there. We cobbled this group together. I'll tell you what I cobbled together. I cobbled together dinner. I cobbled together an outfit. I don't cobble together a group of individuals that I want to be successful, and I'm certainly more thoughtful than that. So I'm not giving this credit. I don't want to give this credit. I I don't think it was good intentioned, even if it was good intentioned.
Right.
So my partner was a part of a hiring panel at a studio, and one of the pieces of feedback that one of the other interviewers gave about a candidate was that she was, quote, not scrappy enough.
Oof.
Scrappy
Oof.
means disorganized. So they were saying this person is not disorganized enough to mesh with our culture, basically. But anyway, it's just so funny to me how frequently people look for the wrong things. Like we were talking about earlier about how it's important to hire to add to your existing culture, not to fit the existing culture, but to add to it, right? And I think that kind of is similar to a lot of the ways that people go wrong, which is they conceive of kind of the ideal, the platonic ideal of a candidate, and then they go out and seek that instead of trying to get as many candidates as they can and then seeing which of those candidates fills the most holes on the team, right? Like who is bringing the most to the table that we don't already have here. And I think that is a much better approach to go about it, and for a variety of reasons. Because I take that perspective about other things, not just like gender or race, but like I want to hire someone who fills a hole on my team in terms of their expertise, right? So
Yeah.
if I don't have a console expert, if I don't have someone who's experienced in cert, then I'm going to want to hire a cert specialist over someone else who maybe has lots of great qualifications and is in many ways the platonic ideal of a tester. But if they don't know cert, then I'm going to hire the one who fills the hole on my team. But there's a lot of holes in your team, right? It's not just expertise. There's lots of other things. There's perspectives, right? Like, do you have fresh perspectives on games? Do you have perspectives from people who like different kinds of games? Or is everyone you're hiring a Diablo 2 fanatic, right? Like, is that the only type of person you're hiring? Anyway, so I think it's interesting how Chelsea and I had very different approaches to that, which is I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, because even if these folks are not like being genuine here, and I don't know if they are or not, but even if they are, I think there probably are people out there who do have good intentions, who just keep stumbling into making the same mistakes that perpetuate the status quo. And for the record, the status quo is bad.
Yeah. I would say at this point they need to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. And if technology companies
Oh
like
God,
if
I hate that phrase, Myron. You just
Oh my
triggered me
God.
so
all right,
hard.
so like if I literally just said into the ether, Google, how fast is Mars moving through space right now? It immediately starts answering. And so you mean to tell me the same people who have access to that kind of technology can't find diverse candidates? I disagree. Vehemently. It's real easy. I just put together a team of like all black people that was 67% women in like 5 weeks. We went from vision to demoing features.
All right. Let us move on to the next thing that we were going to talk about, which was we wanted to talk about the personas of women in the industry, which is just kind of another way of saying we want to talk about the different perspectives that different women can bring to the table professionally. So we kind of earlier we talked a little bit about how being a pregnant woman or a woman who just recently had a kid can affect your experience with the industry. Are there other kinds of personas, maybe ones that Chelsea, you or Sarah feel like you belong to, that also kind of impact how you interact with your coworkers in your job?
Sarah, do you want to go or do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay, so I think oof. I'm going to tell the one that I identify most with first. I'm the emotional woman. I spent the first 10 years of my career crying. So I think the hard part of that is people view my crying as being sad, or like that. In actuality, when I'm crying, I'm usually like 75% of the time mad. And for many years, that mad was targeted at myself. Like, hey, I'm too dumb to do this. Why can't I handle it? Why can't I grasp it? It was very self-deprecating. I won't even say deprecating. I don't think so. There's a self-hatred that went along with it. I see my counterparts, and I will say that in this instance, they were male. I see my counterparts around me handling things so well and doing things and getting things done. And I'm the emotional leader. I've literally been given permission to cry in meetings before by male counterparts. Like, it's okay if you need to cry.
I've been told not to cry. Like,
Yeah.
So please don't cry. Just please stop crying. Stop crying. Like, that's a very common reaction, but like, yeah.
And I think the sad part, I'm going to tell you what I think the sad part is that men should be able to express those emotions in that way too. And we've also repressed men. So I'm not going to say, oh, poor women, because at least I have a space where I can emotionally react. It was largely viewed as negative. I think I was naive at that point and thought that it was a negative point. But now I feel it is emotionally freeing if I cry in a meeting, especially because I have direct reports who look at me and say, like, is this proper behavior? Yes, it's proper behavior for you to feel emotional and human and for you to share that with your manager. Also, I'm emotional when I react. You saw it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to guarantee that at least probably one of you thought, like, damn, she's really, like, she's being a bee right now. Like, she reacted very strongly to that. Well, guess what? That's been held against me. And I'm passionate. I'm not outspoken. I'm not emotional. I'm outraged.
And that's something like men can be. Like, I can do that. I can be emotionally outraged, especially in like, I'm upset with this. This is not fair, and here's why. Listen to my opinions.
Yeah.
And that's me showing strength. No one's gonna call me a bitch. They're gonna say, when they will, is if I cry, just like you said. And showing emotional fortitude is shown as a strength, but like, women, you can't show emotion unless it's like passiveness or pleasantries.
Yeah. Oh, look at that woman. She's crying looking at a photo of a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at that woman. She's reacting really strongly to her pet dying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't need to put on armor to deal with each other, folks. Like, awakening yourself to being mindful of your emotions is not a gendered trait.
No.
It's a human trait. And so I think when I think of personas of a woman, being called emotional, I think was a really big weapon, and I still think is a big weapon. But now I look at it and I'm like, I'm an emotional human.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. I'm allowed to have emotions. I'm not some friggin' ATM machine for you to take the, like, insert whatever thing you're trying to get out of me, right? Are you trying to get my sexualized womanlyhood out of me? Are you trying to get my brilliant thought out of me? Are you whatever it is, I'm printing that for you? No. I'm a living, breathing human with many things that I'm dealing with independently on my own every single day.
Yeah.
And that is okay. That's what I'm hiring people for.
Yeah. And I think that this kind of goes back to the question that we had at the start of the episode. Where were you when you realized that women are people? Is that we often aren't treated as people, in both the sense that we are dehumanized, but also in the sense that we are not treated as individuals with individual needs and reactions and strengths and weaknesses, and like just trying to kind of paint over all of us with the same brush when we're really a wide variety of humans with very different lives.
Yeah. Who cares about the romantic situation of someone in your office? Like, stop being nosy. They're allowed to go through it. Who cares what they're, as long as it's consenting, like making them happy, who cares? It's not your living situation. You're not living in, who cares if they're living in an apartment and you're living in a house? Like, allow people to have their own circumstances for happiness and emotions. And if it is unhealthy, then step in. But like, you don't need people to be the same as you emotionally or like life circumstance wise for them to be valid humans.
Yeah.
Right. Even if they're not doing God's will and having children.
Yeah.
Sarah, I want to make sure we get to you because you let me go first.
So this is going to shock the whole group, so I'm glad you're all seated. But I'm the quiet woman.
What?
Whoa, hold on.
Hold the phone.
Hold on. This didn't come up during the interview.
It's true. So I'm quiet. I let others go first when speaking. I don't interrupt people in meetings. I guess you could say, at least outwardly passive. So it's difficult for me sometimes to, get my points across in a timely manner, like in a meeting where something's urgent, for instance. And I think, as much as I hate it, I think that is somewhat to my benefit because women are expected to be passive. They're expected to be yes people. So, it's hard kind of trying to break through that and not, as Chelsea called out, being seen as aggressive or, the B word.
I'll take credit for both of those.
That reminds me, Chelsea, where's your strengths report? Sorry.
Dang.
Myron over here making sure we do our homework.
Yeah. By the way, we have homework, folks. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yes, team building. But you're absolutely right, Sarah. And so like I just took a look at your strengths and I'm like, okay, all right, definitely you take notes for the meeting too, right? Like you probably enjoy, but like it shouldn't be expected from every environment that you are ever in, right?
No.
So like when I go to a meeting and I'm like, yo, I don't want to do any homework, I can actually say that on like the second day at work.
I don't want to do any homework. I want to bring up like a couple of other things really quickly when we think about personas. Like, what is your dress code? What are you expecting people to look like when they come to work? Because I will say that I feel very nervous when I wear a t-shirt and my hair's not done when I go to work. In fact, I bet if you look back at the episodes here, I generally don't put on makeup, but I always get nervous about the perception of how I look, so I put on makeup. I'm going to tell you my insecurity. I literally woke up an hour and a half early this morning so that I could make sure that I had time to, one, lay in bed and play phone games because that's my morning, like, wake-up ritual.
Phone games.
But then secondarily, like, make sure that I looked presentable enough. And then I had a crisis because I didn't take a shower, so my hair didn't look as good as I wanted to. And then I started doing my makeup, and then I changed my shirt, so my makeup had to change. Like, you're getting insight into me feeling insecure presenting myself to you. So imagine at work where it is actually very consequential, me making sure that I look right for the day. On Mondays, I wear better clothes because I'm going to be with higher visibility folks. On Tuesdays, I know that that's usually my day. I can not. And so while I won't say that it's like a sexual object thing, I'm sure that there's some roots there. Also be conscious of, like, when you compliment someone, hey, you look great today, that it's not, hey, you, like, I like it when you do your makeup can be very different depending on what your circumstances is, but like are with the person, right? Hey, did you get a haircut? Really a wonderful compliment for recognizing, hey, something changed for you. But like, be conscious of the compliments that you give because then that person will probably strive to be as great or good every single day, or there's pressure to do that or whatever.
Especially
Right?
if you're in a position of power. right?
Yeah.
Like if one of your colleagues, right, who's maybe it's the same title as you, or not one of your direct supervisors, if they say something like that, carries a very different weight to it than if
Absolutely.
your boss said that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If your boss said, "Hey, that's a great haircut," like suddenly you're like, "Oh fuck, I need to have my hair this good all the time because like my boss just told me like my hair's good. I need my hair to be good so my boss likes me." So it's a very different kind of dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're like if you're a random guy in the office, I have a friend that's a woman. She was older than me when we worked together, and I went in the office. They were like, "You have to wear a tie." I'm like, "Oh, I look pretty good," so I'm just gonna say to people, "You have really nice hair." And she told me, "Myron, don't do that. Don't ever do that." And I was like, "Why?" She was like, "It doesn't matter. Just don't do that." In other words, you're in your 20s now. You'll figure it out. But in the meantime, you won't harm people. It's similar to that scenario when I go to my doctor and my bone is sticking out. I'm like, "Yo." And he's like, "Yo, how much do you weigh, dog?" Yeah, let's work on that. That changes it to be something very different. Because this is a random ass person. Like, I don't know them. Like when my friends tell me, "Oh, Myron, that's a nice cap, dude." Like, "Yo, you been working out?" That's different. So like the colleague angle, that's different. The boss angle, that's different. There's subtlety involved, that's different. And you just have to burn the calories. Like we're not giving, as a society, we're prioritizing getting the job done. We're prioritizing getting the most skilled people in the all male studio, and like learning that women are people, and learning how to like the skills to work on an intersectionally diverse team are literally not being taught to people, and the expectations aren't there either.
Um, so I want to talk a little bit about my persona, at least in the context of this conversation.
Hmm.
So I bring some different traits to the table when I'm coming to work, in the sense that I'm a trans woman, so I experience gender equity in some different ways than cisgender women do. So just as an example, I once applied for a job at a coffee shop, and it was working in the back lifting boxes and stuff. And so the manager, when she talked to me, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was actually looking for more of like a big strong man." Like she literally said big strong man. And so my reaction to that was, like, you would expect it would just be anger, right? But my actual reaction to it was both anger and euphoria. And it was anger that I was being denied a job, but it was euphoria that she was recognizing that I was a woman. So there's this weird, like, thing that I get sucked into sometimes, where when I am mistreated because I am a woman, I say to myself, well, at least they're treating me like a woman, like they're and it's weird. It's a really bizarre position to be in, because like you don't want to like being mistreated, but it is very validating when people treat me like a woman. Um, and the flip side of that is, I've had different people in my career that I've worked with who have been dismissive towards me for one reason or another, and it's always been hard for me to tell, are they being dismissive of me because I'm incompetent? Are they being dismissive of me because I'm trans? Are they being dismissive of me because I'm a woman? Or are they being dismissive of me because I'm in QA? I don't know. It's hard to say. But there have been some occasions where it has become really clear why they were dismissive towards me. And one of them, I was talking to an engineer, and then during the course of the conversation, I mentioned that I was trans. And prior to that conversation, I had felt like this person was completely dismissive of me. And after that conversation, I had a completely different relationship with them. And I don't think it had anything to do with what we were talking about. I think it had everything to do with the fact that their perspective on me changed from thinking of me as a cisgender woman to a trans woman. And when they think trans woman, they think male, and thus they gave me more respect than they would have otherwise. Like, I can't say for certain that that's what happened. Again, like, I don't know why people are dismissive of me. There's any number of reasons they could be. But that was what appeared to happen. When I outed myself to them, their attitude towards me changed. And it wasn't that they were friendlier, they were more willing to hear me out.
Ouch and yay and
Wow.
ouch and
Ouch and yay.
yay.
Is my experience
wild roller coaster
with the industry, right? Like I simultaneously love this industry and I also simultaneously freaking hate it sometimes.
Yeah.
And
for valid reasons.
And yeah, so like, and again, that experience is completely different from, you know, any of the experiences that Chelsea or Sarah have. They have their own, you know, diverse set of terrible things that have happened to them in in this job.
That just underscores they're like, well, I'm confused, but it sounds like you used to be a person, so we'll treat you more like a person,
I don't
not
even
like a
think
full
he was
person.
cognizant of it, right? Like I think he was completely unaware of his own bias.
Right. But
It happens.
the impact is what we look at.
Yeah.
Right.
The impact is what we want to look at. And that it like you have an amazing front row seat, Ariel, because you get to see, even though it sucks hard in a very, 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 very bad way, but you get to see when people flip the switch of you as a full person or you as the woman that you are.
Yeah. As I have gotten more experience, though, I have gotten better at getting angry at the right things and getting euphoric at the right things. So when I was in a company meeting, I once made a suggestion about how we could mentor new testers, and it was immediately dismissed. And then the second person who spoke after me suggested exactly the same thing and got like a much different reception to it. And he didn't even express it better than I did. And so in that case, I wasn't euphoric. I was just angry. And I am at least glad at my own personal growth that I have gotten to a point where I can be just angry when I need to be just angry.
Yeah.
But I still run into shit like that.
Yeah, it takes calories to get it right.
Yep.
For everyone.
All right. So we want to wrap up soon, but I do want to give Chelsea a chance to dive into one more persona / topic, and then we'll wrap up after that.
So I think one last thing that is the idea of a team mom. Like I have been placed in this role more than once. I've had folks who have employed me call me their mom in a very derogatory way, and I'm doing. And when they say it, I know what they mean. I'm doing the housekeeping. I'm keeping the home, afloat. And so while it's very empowering to think like, hey, I'm doing those things, I know that they mean it in a way that is not good. I'm the one who always takes notes because it's expected of me. I'm the one who plans all the morale activities because that's what's expected. I'm mothering the team through life. And at one point in time, I was really proud of that. I was actually very proud of it in my career. Hey, my team trusts me to care for them. And so it's not always necessarily a negative perspective. But then when you look at it from the I get all the shit work perspective, that's when it gets more difficult for me to digest. So when you look at the women in your life and around you, make sure that you're not automatically placing them in the role of mother. That's emotional labor. That's physical labor. That's digital labor. That's making sure that you're not placing your relationship hygiene on them. And I will say, as a wife, as a daughter, as a sister, we all need to take that into account as well, because I tend to be the mothering type. And sometimes I need mothering too. Sometimes I need someone to take care of me. And so me learning how to do that has been a big part of it. But make sure that you're not placing the emotional labor, all of the labor on your mother, whoever that is, and that you're making conscious decisions to be equals in maintaining a relationship.
As like a small note with like the team mom, like taking notes, being in a meeting where it's all guys and you ask who's going to take notes and no one says anything. Priceless. Absolutely priceless to have everyone assume like, oh wait, where's the woman who's going to take notes for us? Or when there is finally or amazingly a woman in that meeting, assuming that she's the one who's going to take notes, saying like, hey, can you take notes for us? Thanks.
Yep.
It's that expectation that they're the ones that are going to keep things organized, keep everyone tidy while everyone else is talking and spitting out ideas. And they'll let everyone know and here's what we came to. Here you go, everybody. I'll take care of you.
Yep.
Yeah. And real quick, why does it suck to be the person to take notes? You're so busy taking notes that you don't actually get to participate.
Mm-hmm.
And digesting it, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to baby bird it back to everyone is something that I think it's why I like recording meetings, honestly. It's why I like the ideas of agendas. They're so important because each person can handle their agenda items. There are ways to do this so that we are better stewards to each other and we don't lose everyone when we participate. So maybe that's a good conversation for the future, is for us to talk about those work systems.
Yeah. Agreed.
I also
All
want to
right.
make one more suggestion, Ariel,
Yeah, go ahead.
for future topics. We did not get to women as characters in games and
Yeah.
diversity in games. And so I would love to suggest, and, plus one us here community, let us know if there are other topics that you feel, but we did not get to talk about, like, when you realize a woman in a game is a woman and not a sexual object. When you realize a person who's not white, I'm just going to be really honest here, is an actual protagonist or a main character and not just as the black person in the role or the person of color in the role. Like, those are things that we didn't get to talk about in either situation. I would love for us to have that discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would also love to dive into some of the more specific things that, transgender and non-binary
yes.
folks deal with in the industry at some point. Kind of scratch the surface here and there, but there's a lot to go into. All right, cool. Well, let's wrap up there. I really want to thank everyone for joining us on the podcast today, especially Sarah. She runs all of our social media and community management. So it's just really awesome to have her here and on the podcast with us. So thank you for joining us, Sarah. Please do it again. And I'd also like to thank the audience for listening and watching. We really just wouldn't do this podcast without you. If you have suggestions for future topics or bugs of the day, we'd love to hear them. If you are a QA professional and would like to be on the podcast, we would love to have you. In either case, please contact us at undergroundgameqaconf, CONF, @gmail.com. Or you can reach out to us on Twitter at undergroundqa, because we would love to hear from you and collaborate. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Like, we really, really love having people who aren't just the five of us on here. Like, it's just so
really nice.
so great to have new perspectives, because every time we bring someone new on, I feel like I learned something that I just wouldn't have had a chance to if they had never come on.
It's about perspectives. It's not about being an expert, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's about bringing your perspective and having the discussion. And I promise we do prep meetings, so you don't have to feel blindsided. We will help you walk through.
We're not going to just toss you into the stream and be like, okay, talk about it.
We will tell you what topics we're going to talk about, what questions we might ask you. Like, you won't feel blindsided. And if you are new in QA, like if this is your first QA job or if you're trying to get into QA, that is also a useful perspective for us.
Yes,
because then we can
please.
have someone who can ask us questions that other new folks in QA would ask, but aren't here to ask.
Yeah.
So
It's a culture ad.
Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
culture ad, exactly that. So really, like, no matter what your experience level is, if you're interested in this podcast and you want to get involved, get in touch. We would love to put you on an episode. Especially so if there's a particular topic that you're really interested in, because I love bringing people who are passionate about their topics on. Cool. Oh, shoot, we totally forgot to plan for a bug of the day. Does anyone have a bug of the day?
Oh man, for anyone who missed it, there was a bug that was brought up about Skyrim. Did anyone hear about the bee?
Oh, the bee. Yes, the bee on the wagon. Yeah.
Yo,
You wanna
easy over there.
expand on
Sarah's
this?
in the room. Like,
I didn't work on Skyrim. It's okay.
Got him.
Can you tell me about this bee? Because I don't know about it.
Okay, so the bug is that you would be in the initial like opening of Skyrim where you wake up and it's like, oh, you're finally awake. Yeah, that classic deal, right?
That
And while
classic.
while the cart's going down the road, suddenly the cart will just shoot off into the sky. And it's just what is causing this. So what had happened? I gotta find. I found the
What
article.
happened
I
was
just linked the article in chat here.
What
It's
had
a-
actually
Oh my
happened
god,
is
the Photoshop.
the issue had to do with the bees. So collision physics had be added to insects so that players could pick them up as an ingredient. And it's great until a bee flies by in front of the cart. And then the cart hits the bee, which has collision physics. And the bee is now an immovable object with an unstoppable automated cart force and causes the cart to
I love
shoot
it
up
so much.
into the air. Just
Yes,
classic.
exactly. Holy
Gosh.
moly.
It's
I
game-
love video games.
I love it when game physics go wonky. I worked on this one game called Inversion, which was like a gravity shooter, and you could shoot a lava with this gravity gun, and it would create a little ball of lava. And we found out pretty quickly that when you throw these balls of lava, if you hit a person with them, it will send them flying out of the level. Just like at an astronomical speed, just poof, they're gone. There they go. It's so great. So we had a lot of fun throwing lava balls at each other.
Love it. Making games.
Making games. All right. Did anyone have anything they want to plug?
Yes. If you are going on a journey of finding yourself and you find yourself looking for ways to explore, there's a workbook called The Mindful Way. And the subtext here is an 8-week program to free yourself from depression and emotional distress. But I'm going to be really honest. I think it's for anybody who has dealt with self-deprecating feelings, ruminating on past events. Why don't I feel as happy as I could? Why do I get stuck on things that are happening? And I'm very open about my struggles with depression and anxiety. I think if you're struggling with how to put yourself in a world where there's a lot of pressure and you're maybe feeling a little more lonely than you used to and you overthink everything, it's a really great way to give yourself a framework to think about things. There are good tools. There are good exercises to help you think and really good examples. And I'm here to help and talk you through other resources that are available and things that have happened. But that is my plug for today.
I really love that theme, Chelsea. So I'm gonna pick up on it as well. The Feeling Good handbook works really well. It's like heavily CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, but
Yes.
it also
Plus one.
like this handbook in particular combines like sort of like things that you're kind of like lecture, but also so what do you think about this blah blah blah, and like walk you through the process. And the second thing that I'll mention, and this is for depression, anxiety process. Yes. The second thing I'll mention on anxiety in particular, CBD may work for you. For me, I do CBD for my anxiety, and it for me personally, it's a personal thing too. it works way better than like Zoloft. So cannabis and the Feeling Good handbook.
I love those plugs. So when I was doing some research for this episode, I found this really great IGN article called "How to Support Women and People of Color in Game Development." There are a bunch of really great organizations that article talks about, like Black Girls Who Code, Women in Games International, Girls Who Make Games, Latinas in Tech, just really a ton of really awesome organizations that are trying to promote equality in the games industry. So if you're interested in getting involved, or if you're looking for a charity to donate to, I strongly recommend those organizations. And I linked that article in the chat here, but it's, again, IGN.com, How to Support Women and People of Color in Game Development. Cool. All right, well, I think that'll do it for us. So again, thank you everyone for joining us, and please continue to keep playing, keep testing, and as always, keep washing your hands.
Please wear your mask.
Please.
Yeah, and wear a freaking mask. Jesus.
It's a very low bar, friends. Just
Yeah.
step over it and put on a mask.
Also, consider vaccination. Consider it. That's that coaching language that I've been just beating. Consider it. It's not an order. It's just consider.